Welcome to Pod Save America. I'm Jon Favreau.
I'm Jon Lovett.
I'm Tommy Vietor. Why did you say it like that?
I don't know how I said it.
I'll leave it in.
What did I say?
I don't know.
I have a tickle.
Is it?
I have a tickle. There's a gay cold going around. There really was. There was a gay pride cold.
But you are COVID negative.
Many times. Many tests ever since.
Let's get right to the news. The Delta variant of COVID-19 is currently tearing through unvaccinated populations around the world, and here in the United States, where about 43% of eligible Americans still haven't gotten their first shot. People's refusal to get vaccinated is leading to more hospitalizations, more deaths, and the return of restrictions in places like here in Los Angeles, where masks are once again required for public indoor settings. The Biden administration is now saying that one reason people aren't getting their shots is because of the misinformation being spread on social media platforms like Facebook. We heard it from White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain, who told Kara Swisher a few weeks ago that unvaccinated focus groups keep repeating vaccine misinformation that they say they saw on Facebook. We heard it on Thursday from Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, who issued the first public health advisory of his tenure on health misinformation. We heard it on Friday from White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki, and we heard it from President Biden himself in response to a reporter's question on the topic. Here are some clips of the last three people I mentioned.
My worry is that all this is misinformation that's floating around. It's having a real cost that can be measured in lives lost, and that is just tragic.
There's about 12 people who are producing 65% of anti-vaccine misinformation on social media platforms. All of them remain active on Facebook, despite some even being banned on other platforms, including Facebook, ones that Facebook owns.
On COVID misinformation, what's your message to platforms like Facebook?
They're killing people. I mean, look, the only pandemic we have is among the unvaccinated. And they're killing people.
So Facebook responded in a rather whiny blog post that their data shows 85% of U.S. Facebook users have been or want to be vaccinated. They said they've removed over 18 million instances of COVID-19 misinformation since the pandemic began, and they've prohibited the purchase of ads that include false information about vaccines. Biden then clarified his remarks this morning, Monday morning, saying, quote, Facebook isn't killing people. My hope is that they would do something about the misinformation. That's what I meant. Tommy,
Said Facebook isn't killing people. Mark Zuckerberg is killing people.
Yeah, just to be more specific, I want to clarify my comments. Mark and Cheryl themselves are out there killing people.
COVID is killing people. Facebook is spreading COVID.
Tommy, how much blame do you think Facebook deserves here?
I mean, some part of it. I found the Facebook response to be shockingly childish. They tried to throw it into a political frame and suggest this was about meeting a political goal, when I think, this is about saving lives and getting people good information. Before COVID existed, the World Health Organization listed vaccine hesitancy as one of the top 10 threats to global health. So it's not a new problem, because for years, Facebook, Twitter, other social media sites have allowed vaccine misinformation to spread. They also helped it spread. If you joined like a natural parenting group, you would often get algorithmically shown a suggestion that you join an anti-vaccine group, right? So they've helped these groups grow. They've helped them organize. This is a long-term problem. It's not just specific to COVID now. So it's hard to really delineate like what their share of the blame is. But it's notable that they're happy to offer you reams and reams of information about all the ways they're helping people get good information. And when you ask them to provide information about who is seeing vaccine misinformation on their site, they refuse to present any data or give it to researchers or do anything. So, clearly, like, you're hearing anecdotally in polling focus groups that people are getting bad info and getting scared about the vaccine on Facebook.
Lovett, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, they've spent a very long time kind of priming the conspiratorial pump. That's outright misinformation and falsehoods, but that's also just sort of encouraging conspiratorial communities to form on a host of different issues and to elevate some of the most conspiratorial thinkers in our politics, mostly from the right wing. And there is plenty of misinformation they have taken down, but I imagine, let me say it like this, but when you go and look at what stays up, no, it is sometimes hard to identify a brazen lie, but just asking questions, just sowing misinformation, just sharing misleading statistics, like that is the kind of that is the like bread and butter of countless conspiracy theorists. And to Facebook's point, that lives on Facebook, that lives off Facebook. It's a huge societal problem, but Facebook is a massive part of how people get and share information. And so it is a big problem on Facebook. Facebook talks about the billions and billions of pieces of positive, good information people have received. To Tommy's point, they will never tell you the other half of that equation. They know how many pieces of misinformation they've taken down. They could very easily tell us how many people saw it before that happened, but they won't.
Yeah, so one thing we know for sure is that the country is awash in misinformation about vaccines, right? 1 in 5 Americans, according to a YouGov poll, believe that it's definitely true or probably true that there's a microchip inside the COVID-19 vaccines. 30 to 44-year-olds were the most likely age group to believe that. So this is not something, Lovett, that we can just blame on the baby boomers, which I know you always love to do.
Look, a millennial is just a baby boomer waiting to happen. It's just the reality
1 in 5,
of the situation.
20% think there's a fucking microchip in the COVID vaccine. So we know that misinformation exists, and obviously Facebook is one of the the biggest social media platform in the world, right? On Friday, the day this all went down, the top Facebook post about vaccines in the United States was from Marjorie Taylor Greene, falsely stating that the vaccines are not FDA approved. That was the #1 post on Friday, the day all this went down, and then Facebook started complaining about it. So, I mean, it's true. Like, Facebook is the sort of weapon of choice, but the ammo comes from Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, Republican politicians. Donald Trump is now flirting with it over the weekend. He had a statement, saying maybe people aren't taking it because they don't trust Joe Biden, so he's dipping into it too. But Facebook certainly helps spread it.
Yeah, I mean, here's one thing I think that is indisputable, is that their response is incoherent. So Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Democrat, big-time anti-vaxxer, he's banned on Instagram, but he's not banned on Facebook. How does that make sense?
Right.
How does that work? Maybe he broke the terms of service on IG, but not Facebook. But seemingly you could rationally decide, okay, this guy's a bad actor spreading harmful information. We should take him off the platform. And there was a study that labeled these folks the disinformation dozen that the White House has cited that found that 65% of anti-vax content comes from 12 people. They looked at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And 9 of these 12 are still on all of these platforms. So, Facebook's approach to these issues has evolved over time. They started in the lazy Silicon Valley libertarian place of we believe in free speech. We believe, it's bullshit. It's just that's the easiest thing for the Mark Zuckerberg of the world to say to rationalize and defend a hands-off approach. Over time, they started taking people off like Alex Jones, folks like that, and they've clamped down harder and harder and harder on disinformation. But I think until October of this year, they allowed anti-vaccine paid advertisements.
Right.
They were getting money.
I mentioned that. It was just in October. You're right. That they started doing that.
And there's still exemptions in that ban for legislation. So, I'm not saying this is an easy issue, but it's completely incoherent when you look at their response.
Well, so you said one easy step is at the very least banning people or posts, misinformation posts from folks who are already banned on other Facebook-owned platforms. That's low-hanging fruit. What more could Facebook and other social media platforms be doing in general to combat misinformation about the vaccines? Lovett?
Well, one step that Facebook refuses to take is the only information we get, kind of overview of what people are seeing, is from Facebook. Mm-hmm. And because Facebook has a communication strategy to be completely disingenuous, obtuse and sleazy through virtually all of their communications for years, nobody trusts what they put out. Nobody believes it's giving them a full picture. And we know that they're kind of cherry picking the information that best suits their argument. They'll point out all the billions they'll point out all the misinformation they take down. They don't tell us how much of it has reached people, for example. And so there's this push to allow researchers access to Facebook's information, its data, its back end, to kind of do research on the ways in which misinformation spreads and promulgates through their platform and off their platform. And they obviously do not see it in their interest to allow this to happen. But I would argue that if they genuinely believe they want to create this safe and productive place for community, they should want this transparency. They should want to be intellectually honest and rigorous and bring these kinds of outside experts in a way that's anonymized, that is a way that keeps private information private, but that will give them, I think, some credibility and some genuine sort of goodwill in the fight to make a safer community that a huge proportion of the planet uses.
So more transparency. The White House has called on them to be more transparent as well. Tommy, anything else?
I think giving independent researchers access to their data is the biggest thing they need to do as well. I mean, it just speaks to the fundamental problem with this company is like they say trust us all the time. And when you think back to all the, sort of like hat in hand Mark Zuckerberg apologies that have happened along the way, starting with him suggesting that it's crazy to think that fake news could have had an impact on the 2016 election. They've just given us time and time again reason not to trust what they say. So, I understand that these are not easy questions. The idea of working with the government raises First Amendment issues as well. But like to your point, Lovett, you would think you would want a platform where videos like the Plandemic video that essentially accused Dr. Fauci of creating the coronavirus didn't spread like wildfire to millions of people for a week before you take it down. Like, get some folks on top of this.
And again, like is at fault there too, right?
Oh,
like
absolutely.
It's not just
YouTube,
Facebook. This should
Twitter,
go beyond Facebook.
Of course.
So, the other point that Jen Psaki mentioned in her press briefing is that Facebook has the ability to tweak their algorithm to promote credible sources of information over less credible sources. They haven't done that yet. How do we know they can do that? Well, there's the story of the, quote, nicer news feed after the 2020 election. In the days after the election, Facebook employees convinced Mark Zuckerberg to change the algorithm so that it gave more weight and visibility to publishers with high news ecosystem quality, or NEQ, scores, which are in Facebook a secret internal ranking that Facebook assigns to news publishers based on the credibility of their stories. And in the days after the election, when they did that, CNN, New York Times, NPR became more highly visible posts than partisan sites like Breitbart or Occupy Democrats. And so and there was this big story, we had a nicer news feed, and all the employees were like, are we going to have this forever now? And then a couple of weeks after the election, after the insurrection, after everything, when Joe Biden gets inaugurated, they just shut it off. They could have done it.
I know, and look, and they clamped down on anti-vaccine information in 2019 after there was a giant measles outbreak, a disease that we basically eradicated in California that led to like 80-something kids dying. They have, announced new policies limiting the spread of groups that give bad health advice or organize, the militias with ties to violence. So along the way, they keep taking these steps. The challenge is their response seems to be, okay, but we've helped so many people find authoritative information by steering them there. But if you create a community where for a decade, anti-vaxxers, QAnon, Alex Jones, just shred everyone's faith in institutions, and then you have a big tech company handing you over to the CDC for the information about the groups and people they've just been attacking, it's not going to work. The damage is done.
Yeah.
It's also they constantly try to turn their scale from a liability into a strength, and we just shouldn't rhetorically and just allow that message just to work on us. If a supermarket had a bunch of different kinds of cereal that were deadly, and that if you had a single bite of it, you would fall down and die. Mm-hmm. We would not accept as an argument from Stop and Shop that they've removed almost 90% of the deadly boxes of cereal. We would say, hold on a second, there's a deeper problem here. How is this cereal getting on your shelves? What brands are responsible? What are you doing to fix it? And so only in, we don't allow buildings to get so big that parts of it can fall down. We don't allow companies to get so big that their products can kill a certain percentage of their people. Well, sometimes we do, to be honest.
I was going to say, I think we do both of those.
Sometimes we do those.
Yeah.
But we don't accept it. We don't accept it. And so we should not allow Facebook to use its scale as a defense. It's not a defense. You built this giant fucking conglomerate, this giant monstrosity. You have to figure out how to govern it. It's not our fault you got so big.
Oh, and one more thing, I mentioned earlier about Trump and the statement. What do we think about him now sort of dipping his toe into the, he actually has done it a couple times now. He likes to take credit for the vaccines being developed under his watch. Now he's saying, people aren't getting them because they don't trust Joe Biden and they think the election was stolen. It was sort of a mishmash of a dumb statement, but
this is not a new position for him. It's more of a return to form. There was this infamous study from the late 90s called the Wakefield study that suggested that measles, mumps, and rubella vaccines caused autism. That study has been retracted. Subsequent studies have found it was completely wrong, but it has been enormously damaging and sort of is the root of a lot of the anti-vaxxer sentiment you see. Trump, as recently as 2012, 2014, was tweeting that kids shouldn't get vaccines because it causes autism. So if he's now going back to a position where he's raising concerns about vaccines and getting vaccinated, it would be his previous position that he, kind of grudgingly walked back from once he got into the White House.
Thank God he wants to take credit for the vaccine on some level, because if he didn't, it's very clear he'd be completely anti-vax. He'd be right there with Marjorie Taylor Greene and Tucker Carlson right now. That's where his heart is.
Yeah.
But of course, he wants credit for the vaccine. He is vaccinated. So I think we have this, this statement from him is actually just punditry. right? He's not saying that the mistrust is correct. He's saying, look at what Biden's causing because of for all the reasons he wants to, lay blame at Biden's feet. But he's not actually crossing the threshold yet.
Yeah, but Donald Trump Jr., if you look at his Instagram, which for some reason I do, he posts anti-vaccine stuff all the time. Like recently, he posts like a photo of a woman with a baby arm growing out of her head that said something about raise your hand if you got the vaccine. Right? It's all like supposed to be for the yucks, memes, LOL stuff, but it's like
edgelord Donald Trump Jr.
Exactly.
All right, Facebook bad. Let's turn to the Biden White House. They aren't really known for even hitting Republicans or right-wing media all that hard. Why do you think they decided to step out on Facebook?
I mean, I think that I talked to some folks there over the weekend who said that the Facebook.
I'm sorry, did you do some reporting?
Yeah, goddamn right I did. I had like a Newsies hat
this?
on. I got out my typewriter. They said that the Facebook's response after Vivek's report went out was just unacceptable, and it just seemed like they were going to drag their feet again. And then the White House is out there saying, hey, we really need your help with disinformation and hygiene on your platform. And instead of hearing about Facebook launching some new initiative to get anti-vax info off their platform, you read stories in the New York Times by people like Kevin Roose about how they might get rid of CrowdTangle, which is the only tool we have to really understand how people are engaging with posts on platform. Like what posts are getting viewed the most. It's an internal Facebook entity that they might just shut down because it's creating a PR headache for them.
Because they don't like seeing Kevin Roose's posts about the top 10 Facebooks being
exactly.
like Bungino, an AP story about the defeating of a sex trafficking ring because QAnon latched onto it. Ben Shapiro.
Yeah, it does seem like, look, the Biden folks were they're frustrated, right? And I'm sure President Biden's comment, I don't even know if his comment was planned about it's killing people. I'm sure he's frustrated because the vaccination campaign has stalled a bit over the last month, and they're seeing the Delta variant spread, and I think going public with this was the only way they knew how to do it, as opposed to just like quietly talking to Facebook behind the scenes. You know?
It just comes on the heels of like constant dumb decision making by Facebook. Like they didn't ban Holocaust denial until October of 2020.
That was Mark Zuckerberg's official position was that he thought it should be on the platform so people should know it's out there.
Love it. It's worse than that. He said, I don't think that they're intentionally getting it wrong when asked about people who post Holocaust denial. Like, yes, they are, man.
Yeah, it seems like you might be off on that one.
There's a long history of intentionally posting anti-Semitic stuff. They wouldn't fact check political ads in the 2020 campaign. So I imagine there's just an accumulating frustration at the idiocy.
I just want to say also that I appreciated this sort of Biden saying they're killing people. It launched this conversation. Then Biden walked it back. It's kind of like a reverse Trump, because what used to happen is Trump would go out and say something kind of that implied something so beyond the pale it kind of repulsed most human beings. Then a few of his most devoted people would go out there and say he didn't mean it, and then on Monday he would say it explicitly, and they'd all be embarrassed. This is the reverse of that. Biden says Facebook's killing people. I don't think they are. A bunch of people defend him, and then he walks it back. He like de-escalates. That's all.
That's one of the many differences.
Among many differences, yes.
Biden team is trying a lot of different strategies to get more people vaccinated. They're calling out misinformation on Facebook. They've got community leaders going door to door. They've got Olivia Rodrigo at the White House. Who do they still need to reach and persuade to get a shot? And what else do you think they should try at this point?
I mean, 1 in 5 Americans believes there's a microchip in your COVID vaccine, right? You mentioned that earlier. The same poll found that 40% of the country thinks the threat of COVID was exaggerated for political purposes, including 85% of the unvaccinated. So I think, the microchip crew, probably going to be a tough get.
Tough sell for the microchip crew.
There are a bunch of people in this country who I think have understandable questions or concerns. They look at the Tuskegee experiments where, black men were given syphilis and not treated by the government. Horrible part of our history. You can imagine why that would create hesitation in the black community. There are young people who are just confused about whether or not they need it. And they've heard news stories about the side effects that are scary. There's pregnant women. There's young people, right? There's all kinds of different groups who I think have legitimate questions, concerns, have seen something disconcerting. Those are all folks that are reachable. I think the hardcore QAnon anti-vaxxers, we're never going to reach them. It's not going to happen.
I think, sorry, excuse me. I feel like you have to separate anti-vaxxers from vaccine hesitant and vaccine skeptical, and we should probably stop saying anti-vax so much because that creates an identity, and we don't want to affiliate people who have concerns, rightly or wrongly, with people that will never get it and are kind of
I always try to say hesitant.
And then so Kaiser Family Foundation did a poll of people who got the vaccine, people who were hesitant to get the vaccine. They looked at 21% of adults who are now vaccinated after saying in January that they planned on waiting, would only get it if required, or would definitely not get it. And so they looked at what changed their mind. 1/4 said it was seeing others, especially friends and family, get vaccinated. 17% were persuaded by a family member, 10% by a doctor or healthcare provider, and then by close friends, coworkers, and classmates. And many of those who said they were persuaded after talking to their own doctor mentioned their doctor encouraging them due to their own or a family member's medical condition, so trying to protect themselves or their family. And then the other factor was the easing of restrictions on vaccinated people. They decided to get it because they could get back to normal life. One of the respondents just wanted to go to the Bahamas. And so we should not underestimate the power of vaccine mandates.
Well, and you'll see a lot of people in LA have responded to the mask mandate that returned here by saying, well, what's the point of getting a vaccine? I thought if I got the vaccine, I didn't have to wear a mask anymore. So that is one potential consequence of that.
Yeah, and look, back to the sort of Mark Zuckerberg being completely naive about why people post Holocaust denial. The other thing I think that they don't seem to get is, according to the Center for Countering Digital Hate, which put out this Misinfo dozen report about these super spreaders of bad information about vaccines, they have found that anti-vaccine activists specifically target Black communities and push this stuff on them, knowing the really dark history in our country. And that's why it has to be an active campaign to counter that misinformation or remove it with good information, right? Because there's a lot of people for whom this is a thing they're very passionate about. They think about, talk about it, organize around it all day. And the rest of us just get vaccinated at some point in our lives and move on with our lives. And there's no countering the disinformation happening. There's just a big void.
So the same poll that Lovett cited, the Kaiser poll, in June of 2021, last month, 65% in that poll said that they had already received at least one dose. We know it's a good poll because at the time in June, it was about 65% according to the CDC as well. 14% said definitely not. That's the microchip crew. 10% said we're going to wait and see. And then 6% said they'll only do it if required. So that 10% and 6% is like basically who we're talking to. There's three things you can do, right, to get people to get a vaccine. There's persuasion, incentives, and mandates. Persuasion is what you guys have been talking about. The other persuasion strategy that I think we haven't used yet, it'd be interesting to see sort of previously vaccine hesitant people who got the vaccine record testimonials, video testimonials and ads, and start running ads where people say, I didn't know if I wanted to get it, and then my father convinced me, or my mother convinced me, or my sibling, and see how that goes. Incentives we've seen the lotteries in different states, right? I do think, everyone's very concerned about mandates. We've had mandates on a state and local level for vaccines forever in our history. In France, Macron, the president of France, announced on Monday that proof of vaccination or a negative test would soon be needed to access public events, restaurants, movies, and airports. Since then, in just 48 hours after his announcement, more than 2.2 million French people booked vaccination appointments. So I really, look, they are legal, right? In March, a federal court upheld an employer's vaccination mandate. It was a hospital system. In Texas, a federal judge held it there. The Supreme Court has upheld local and state mandates for schools for 100 years now. Once the FDA offers a full approval, instead of just emergency use authorization, they'll be on even firmer legal ground, but already employers can do this. And we know that one employer who actually mandates vaccines for their employers is Fox News. According to Fox
Who works there,
News.
that we know?
So Ryan Grimm reported this morning that Fox News has something called a Fox Passport or something, that if you're vaccinated, you can. Now, look, you don't have to mandate like every employer gets it. That every employee gets it. What you can do is say, okay, you either have to get vaccinated to come to work in the office, or you need like a negative test every day or every week or something like that. So you make it harder to not be vaccinated if you don't want to go the full mandate route. But like, I really think instead of just like counting on fucking mask mandates forever, which aren't as effective as vaccinations, you should start vaccinating people. LA County doesn't even have a requirement for their city employees to be vaccinated, even though San Francisco does right now, and they're putting out mask mandates.
And one other piece of this too, the other side of that, I feel like the carrot to that is I do think that there are a lot of people who, are, if not, they're skeptical, they're hesitant, maybe they just haven't gotten around to it yet, and that employers encouraging it and employers giving people time off.
Huge. Or even cash bonuses.
Or bonuses, just incentives at work to get vaccinated and make it part of the culture of your work to get it, I think is another way to kind of encourage it. And the other small thing is, we are now at the place where we're trying to reach people who are hesitant, maybe more likely to be mistrustful of government for a host of different reasons. And I do think that saying vaccines are safe and effective, there is maybe room to start saying something, just like making it a comparison. COVID is far more dangerous than any vaccine. COVID is the risk. The vaccine is far, far less risky. And make that comparison plain to people.
Yeah, I do worry. You're starting to see very clear studies about how partisan vaccination has become. Right, a lot of red states have far lower levels than blue states. You're starting to see sentiment on Twitter and other places. It's basically like, you know what, screw these people. If they don't get vaccinated, they deserve to get, sort of shouting them down, calling people idiots. I think that's very bad. I think we need to approach this conversation with empathy. I think there's a lot of reasons to be scared. There's a lot of bad information online. There's a lot of lack of clarity about how science works, about what an mRNA vaccine is, about how it was developed so quickly, right? Like, you could ask a lot of reasonable questions, and I think if we shout people down and attack them and call them stupid, it's not going to work, especially when you're talking about people vaccinating their kids, right? Like, it's scary.
And again, empathy is great, but even if you want to be purely self-interested about it, the longer this is out there and the fewer people that are vaccinated, the higher the chance that a variant comes along that evades the vaccines. Also, like, this is a stress on our hospitals, right? Like, there are hospitals and healthcare workers in places where there are not a lot of vaccinated Americans who are just seeing the ICUs fill up, and that not only, wears down our healthcare workers, but that means that there's less capacity in those hospitals for other people who get sick, right? So it is in the interest of all of us, for even the most vaccine hesitant person out there, to get the shot, and we should be doing everything we can to convince those people to get a shot or require it. And
don't take your cues from Twitter. Twitter is not the place to have this debate. There are actually people that have spent a very long time thinking about how to persuade vaccine-hesitant people to become vaccinated. Listen to them.
Yeah.
They're often called vaccine whisperers. There are groups that have been formed that have specialized in this and looked at this, and we should be looking to them and not the ridiculous political arguments that play out online about, is this punishment? Is this incentives? Is this persuasion? Put that all aside. There are people that know how to do this.
All right, let's, before we go, take some questions from listeners today. We haven't done that in a while. Fake name McGee asks, I love that Twitter handle. What do you think Joe Biden's favorite Olivia Rodrigo song is, and why is it good for you? But seriously, is there any crossover between unvaccinated and Olivia Rodrigo? Anyone want to take a shot at either of those?
I don't get the last part.
I haven't looked at her
Meaning
crosstabs.
Was it worth having Olivia Rodrigo? I guess this person is saying,
yes.
do we really think that there's a lot of unvaccinated people who listen to Olivia Rodrigo and then would be persuaded?
Olivia Rodrigo is the first person to have been able to kind of obliterate right-wing misinformation from some of the top spouts on Facebook. It actually was competitive.
Her post and Biden's post on Facebook about the visit broke into the top 10.
You saw a bunch of DC reporters being like, Olivia, who? Get me some Springsteen. They're all like trapped in the 80s. But yes, she's wildly popular. Again, my sources in the White House tell me that Biden loves her ballads, but is also into the more like pop punk stuff. So I think like Good For You, Enough For You, anything with a U in it, Biden's super into it.
I think that Biden's favorite song is One Step Forward and Three Steps Back, because that's how he views governing after
God.
Trump. Yeah,
God.
that was my
I just want to say
metaphor.
that several people have accused me of being the author of a certain sentence from 2016. It's spurious, but I will say, come 2022, we'll have to Olivia Rodrigo to the polls.
Oh my God! And now we know that it was you. Now that we know that it was you, that Pokemon go to the polls. All right, Rob asks, if you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Flight. Time travel.
Time travel is number one for me.
Reducing the warming of the planet by 2 degrees Celsius.
Isn't that good of you?
It really depends on the time travel rules that we're talking. Yeah, the ability to carbon.
Number three, the ability to virtue signal.
That's
That's Tommy's superpower.
Oh man, that's
I did
very
that
funny.
one for you too. Just
That's
to see your
very
faces.
funny. My superpower is carbon sequestration. The problem with time travel as a superpower is it really depends on the rules of your universe. Are we talking about rafts moving down a river, a la the Tomorrow War? There are paradoxes. I prefer the primer version of time travel, but therefore it really, I think it raises more questions than it answers. I also think sometimes we underestimate just how much people being able to fly would transform our society. Gravity is a lot of what we rely on for security. Fences, for example. So
that would reduce carbon footprint right there, people flying. All right, Jason asks, what's the new show we should be watching? Here's my top 5, starting with number 5. Too Hot to Handle season 2 on Netflix. Amazing. Trash. Watch it. Kevin Can Fuck Himself on AMC. Great new show on AMC. Very good.
I have a to-do list that's just sort of running, and at some point in the middle of it, it just says Kevin Can Fuck Himself, and I had no idea if that was a weird note I accidentally wrote down. Okay, thank you.
Telling you to watch
that really did just like close a loop in my brain.
Dave on Hulu, season 2.
Very funny.
Fantastic.
Very weird season.
Very weird season, but very well done, I think. The Good Fight on Paramount Plus. I love The Good Fight. It's very, very good. This is one of the best seasons yet. And number 1, White Lotus on HBO is fantastic.
I can't believe it's so funny because all I was gonna say is I'll recommend White Lotus the second something on that show fucking happens. I love Mike White. I actually am enjoying watching it, but I need something to go down.
I don't even need
here.
anything. I think it's
the music is cool.
It's funny. It's smart. It's so good.
I watched the first episode last night. I really like the mean teen characters. I feel like there's a lot of potential there.
Episode 2 is even better with the mean teen characters.
Okay.
I do love the mean.
They're
teens.
hilariously mean.
The second
and
episode is
terrifying.
even better than the first, I think.
If you want to know if Olivia Rodrigo could talk people and stuff, those two could convince literally anyone to get vaccinated just by mocking them.
There's a follow-up on this question. Peps asks, is Tommy to blame for the inexplicable and ongoing success of Emily in Paris?
Yeah, I mean he's a cultural influencer and he loves the show and he's been promoting it basically nonstop. I'm wondering if you have some points on the back end.
Je m'appelle Tommy.
Oh no!
no.
Oh no!
Bonjour.
I like Loki a lot.
I haven't. What's it about?
It's about Loki. It's about Tom Hiddleston.
He's like low key.
He's a trickster. And he gets himself in some hot water, and you gotta it's hard to explain. People
Okay.
should just watch Loki.
Just
It's
give it a shot.
enjoyable. I love
Yeah.
Tom Hiddleston though. Tom Hiddleston in anything. The Night Manager. Yes.
Great show.
Love the Night
Also,
Manager.
Also, hey, listen, I've been very critical of my friends over there at the Walt Disney Corporation. We have a
Why? Don't mess with them.
we have a
We're a
main
media
character.
company. What are you
We have a
doing?
main character.
We love you.
He is LGBT. He is bisexual, and I appreciate it. Now, has he acted upon that in any way? Of course not. But we're moving forward. All right, we're moving forward. Tom
Correct.
Hiddleston, bisexual, A+.
And the Filibuster asks, what's your favorite movie that clearly set up a sequel you wanted to see which was never made? And does the lack of said sequel diminish the overall greatness of that movie? I don't have one, but I know both of you do.
I'm gonna say World War Z. I wanted more World War Z. World War Z is both a movie that should have had a sequel and a great example of successful reshoots. So often reshoots signal that you're gonna get a disaster. World War Z. I wanted more of it.
Someone told me the craziest reshoot, which was I think Back to the Future initially didn't star Michael J. Fox.
Oh yeah,
It was
Eric Stoltz.
Oh,
And
wow.
Now here's
Different movie.
Here's the craziest part about
Yeah.
that. This is the saddest thing. They decided to change to Michael J. Fox, but they had to finish a few days of shooting. And so they were still shooting with Eric Stoltz, and they would just be like, "Don't worry so much about his side. Just get everything we need from the other side."
Oh, that's so sad.
Poor Eric Stoltz. Poor Eric Stoltz.
Eric, you nailed it on the first take. Next, I think you're wrong though on your sequel. The Passion of the Christ. Name a more anticipated sequel than Jesus Christ.
Oh, man.
Name it.
Have you heard the good news? That's the trailer. That's the tagline for Passion of the Christ 2.
Castaway 2.
Castaway.
Someone gets Tom Hanks to take that trip to Tahiti he's always wanted.
It's just,
Hijinks
it's
ensue.
just Wilson on an island.
Yeah, Shawshank 2. Recidivism is a
This
problem.
This is amazing.
I don't know.
I like that you put some thought into this.
Thank
Tommy.
you.
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Jenny asked, on a recent Love It or Leave It, Lovett rated The Departed as a Scorsese B+. What Scorsese movies would you rate as an A?
And I want to be clear, when I say that something is a Scorsese B+,
Who's
I
Scorsese?
consider The Departed.
Scorsese, sorry. I'm a Scorsese.
I consider it a Scorsese. A Scorsese B+ is better than what most directors will ever achieve. I mean that with nothing but love and admiration for Marty. But I love, obviously, Goodfellas, obviously Casino. Now, I occasionally, I won't say it, that I put Casino above Goodfellas. I do believe that's blasphemous, but I love Casino.
I do too.
But I love Goodfellas, and I'm hesitant to even make that claim.
I would do Goodfellas, The Departed, Casino.
But also, The King of Comedy is awesome. It also is the Joker movie. People should go back and watch The King of Comedy before they watch the Joaquin Phoenix Joker. I love the Scorsese oeuvre, all the way back to Mean Streets. But end of thought. End of thought.
Alex asked me, on average, how many tweets do you receive that are clearly intended for the other Jon Favreau? I would say about 2 or 3 per day. No joke. Yeah, it's
yeah.
a lot.
And you get funny emails.
And I always know when he's doing something big because I get a lot of congratulations. I got a lot of congratulations. I guess he was nominated for an Emmy for Mandalorian. I think people tweeted out that my Twitter handle was nominated for an Emmy.
I think it's funny when people reply to Jon Lovett and be like, "How are you dating Ronan Farrow? How's that relationship work?"
John, can we tell the story about how you once got copied on notes on The Mandalorian before it was out?
And I offered my notes. Yeah, an executive sent an email to me and to the.
It's Bob Iger.
Such
Bob
a
Iger
massive error.
Bob Iger sent spoiler notes for The Mandalorian to our Jon Favreau.
And when what do we workshop something funny for you to respond?
Yeah,
you're like, I agree with most of these, but
yeah, I gave a big butt, and then I just looped in the other Jon Favreau, whose email I have because it happens a lot, more especially since I've moved out to LA. Justina asks, "Have you reached out to Taylor Swift for an interview on the pod? Would make the perfect birthday gift for Emily." This is us reaching out. Anyone who can get in contact with Taylor Swift, let her know we would love to have her on the pod. I think she could do some great work on convincing people to get vaccinated. Speaking of role models who do that, there's a lot of bullshit going down in Tennessee. They're trying to ban vaccination requirements in schools or even outreach to kids about vaccination.
About their second dose.
Taylor's home state. She could do a lot of good work there. Come on the pod.
Come on, Taylor.
Come on, Taylor.
Come on, Taylor.
I'll follow Jack Antonoff. I believe he was doing a lot of work with her lately. Maybe we can get him.
Yeah, helped write folklore.
I like
with
the
her.
Bleachers a lot.
Love the Bleachers.
I'll put Ronan
Love
on
Jack
this.
Antonoff.
Does he have a contact?
Come on.
I mean, it's. Are
It's
you
Ronan.
kidding?
He can tell you, who do you need to talk to? He'll get you. We haven't thought of this till now.
Let's go.
All right, let's
Make
do
it
this.
happen, man.
Final question. Favorite cocktail, everyone? Never asked this one for you guys.
I don't know. I mean, I'm such a creature of habit.
I'm an old-fashioned guy.
Yeah, those are great.
So
Tried and true.
Something
Nothing
gin
fancy.
in the summer is real nice.
I'm a gin person. I read once that George Burns, the ancient comedian, used to have a steak and a martini after he did comedy. When I read that as a kid, that stuck with me. So I became someone who ordered martinis at first as a kind of pretentious performance, but then I grew to like them. But I do like a classic gin martini that has a proper amount of vermouth. A lot of people order kind of dirty vodka martinis or extra dry martinis, and really what they're getting is I don't know, pickle juice and a shot of vodka, and it's what kind of life is this?
You are not drunk often, but every time I've seen you drunk, it's because you've been drinking
Yeah.
martinis.
I take my cocktail cues from Ken Burns, and it's usually just moonshine in an old bottle.
I know
I dig out of a river.
I know. So olives make it a martini. Cocktail onions make it a gimlet. What does OxyContin do to it?
Jesus Christ.
What is that called?
All right, on that note, we'll talk to you later this week, everyone. Take care.
Glad we tried the Q&A. Gave it a whirl. And with a bang.